Hello, so today I wanted to talk about Batman the Black Mirror, which is one of my all-time favorite Batman comics. Until last week, I had not read it or touched it for years. And it's always funny going back to something like that, something that you love, but at the same time you haven't interacted with for a long time, just because things are often a little bit different than the way that you remember them. This book is really interesting as a Batman comic because it does not star Bruce Wayne as Batman, it stars Dick Grayson, the first Robin, Nightwing, as Batman. This book came out during a period where Bruce Wayne was thought to be dead, and then he came back, and then he was like, I'm gonna set up Batman Incorporated, but Gotham needs a Batman while I'm off gallivanting about the world, and so Dick Grayson, you're gonna be Batman. And he was already Batman before Batman came back, but then now he's Batman even after Batman came back. There are a lot of Batmans. And so this book was written by Scott Snyder, and it was drawn by Jock and Francisco Francavilla. Now, even though they're both working on the same storyline, the Black Mirror, Jock and Francisco Francavilla both have wildly different styles. Jock's style is more scratchy and dark and twisted, and then Francisco Francavilla's style is oftentimes more colorful and it's more bright, and it reminds me a lot of pulp covers. Whenever Jock is drawing, it's usually whenever Batman is off fighting someone or whenever he's attacking someone or investigating. Batman does a lot of detective work in this comic. And then whenever Francisco Francavilla is drawing this comic, he's always drawing sections that are focused on Commissioner Gordon or Commissioner Gordon's son or his family. Because really that's the core of this Batman book. That's what sets it apart from everything else. Because like I said, Bruce Wayne is not in this. And so as a result, the main relationships are between that of Dick Grayson and Gotham and Jim Gordon and his estranged son. As I said, I remembered this book a little bit differently than it actually is, and I wanted to talk about that, but first I want to tell you how the book actually is. In the first 3 issues, Dick Grayson, the new Batman, is basically tracking down a guy named the Dealer who's out here selling memorabilia from supervillains, and he's selling a lot of the various potions and weapons and artifacts that villains have used. And so Dick Grayson does a lot of detective work to try to find him, and there's a big fight scene at the end of the issue where Batman is fighting this guy in a hangar, and the guy turns into a giant man-bat. And then you get some stuff about how Jim Gordon is meeting his son, who's been estranged from Gotham for a long time. He's meeting him for the first time in many years at a diner, and you find out that the son is rumored to be a serial killer, which is always fun. And you learn a lot of backstory about Jim Gordon and his relationship with his son, who is also named Jim Jr. And so there's an issue in here that recounts a lake trip that they went on. Basically, his older sister, Barbara Gordon, who would become Batgirl, she had a friend over, and Barbara Gordon held onto a science kit, and then the friend had the key to the science kit, so that way anytime they wanted to do science stuff together, they would have to have both pieces in order to do it. And then this girl goes missing, and then Jim Jr. is believed to have killed her in an attempt to get the key, so that way he could do the science stuff by himself, but there's not really any proof or anything. And then the comic cuts away from the Commissioner Gordon stuff and instead focuses back on Dick Grayson and how he is here to solve a mystery about a whale being found on the floor of one of Gotham's banks. And so he does some detective stuff and a body comes out of the whale. And so then it turns into a murder case, and then he fights this guy who has springy legs. And he goes and he finds this guy named Tiger Shark, and Tiger Shark has all these killer whales, and he's a very elaborate Batman villain, and his suit is made of all endangered species. And throughout this comic, Jim Gordon's son is basically acknowledging that he is a psychopath, but he's not a murderer, but he understands that he is a psychopath, and so he's on medication. And Commissioner Gordon loves his son, even though he has questions about him, and so as a result, he asks Batman, Dick Grayson, to go and check up on the son and to have a conversation with him. And so after all this stuff with the whales, Dick Grayson goes and he talks to Commissioner Gordon's son, and the son seems okay. And then this issue ends with Commissioner Gordon's son going to some guy's home where he's been torturing this guy, and he's going to continue torturing him because he's a serial killer. And then there's some stuff with the Joker, and it looks like the Joker has attacked Commissioner Gordon's wife, but then it's revealed to not be the Joker, it's revealed to be Jim Gordon's son. And then as the comic is finishing up, there's a scene where Jim Gordon's son is attacking his older sister, Barbara, who's in a wheelchair at this point, and so he's trying to kill her, but she's able to stab him in the eye and get away. And then Batman comes to save the day, and Commissioner Gordon's son almost gets knocked off a bridge, but then his dad saves him. And so that's how the comic really is. But like I said, despite the fact it has been one of my favorite Batman comics since I read it, I have not read it for years. And I think that the way that I remember the comic is very telling, because I remembered certain things. I remembered the stuff with the Dealer, and I remembered that there was a guy that Batman chased down with weird spring legs, but I completely forgot about Tiger Shark. I completely forgot about all the action with that. I forgot about the detective stuff with that. I forgot about the fact that Batman has a mask that lets him change his face into other people's. I forgot about the fact that the dealer has access to all these different artifacts and weapons from past villains. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that I forgot about most of the action stuff. Anything that you hear me saying where you're like, oh, that's cool. So like, for instance, Batman fighting killer whales and having to escape from the grasp of them, or Batman getting abducted by Tiger Shark and being hung, Batman flying up into a plane and having to take out a guy. I completely forgot about all of that. But the stuff that I didn't forget about was the stuff featuring Commissioner Gordon and his son. I did not forget about the emotionally intense conversations involving the two. I did not forget about the fact that Commissioner Gordon feels this sense of guilt over his son because he knows there's something wrong with his son, but he's never been able to put it into words exactly. And he wonders how much of it is his fault and whether or not it's caused by something that happened in an earlier Batman comic in year 1. And I didn't forget about the anxiety that his loved ones and Dick Grayson and Barbara Gordon, I didn't forget about the emotions that all these people felt whenever they were encountering Jim Gordon Jr. Say that 3 times fast. Jim Gordon Jr., Jim Gordon Jr., Jim Gordon. And so what I'm trying to point out with this is that all the action, all the stuff that you would think is cool, it is cool, but whenever I was away from this comic for years, that wasn't how I remembered it. That wasn't what I carried with me. The stuff from this Batman comic that I carried around with me and have carried around with me for the last several years, especially as I've been writing, it's been all the emotional stuff. The stuff I've remembered about this comic has been about a father and about a son. And I wanted to make this video because I wanted to talk about that idea. I love this comic. I think everything about it is brilliant, but there are certain things in the comic that just break my heart and make me feel sad. Because Commissioner Gordon, in spite of his flaws, is a good man. He wants to do things right and he wants to lead a good life and he wants to help Gotham. And then he just has this son out here who ends up being revealed to be a serial killer. And so this son is kind of the polar opposite of his dad. And that was the stuff that stuck with me. And so the reason I'm making this video is I want to highlight that fact. You may not remember all the details of a story, but you will remember how it made you feel. And I think that is what a lot of comics, I think that's what a lot of Batman comics get wrong. Because comic books are cool. I love comic books. I love superhero comics. But at the same time, I feel like so many comics just miss that point. They miss the fact that you need to have something emotional in order for people to care. So often, I think in books or in films or in music or in comics, people want to focus on something cool. And you see that a lot in comic books, and especially in comic book movies, where it's like, okay, the entire world is ending. The superheroes are trying to save the world once again, because if they don't save the world, then the Anti-Monitor is going to eat it or something. I don't remember the Anti-Monitor that well. And if you're not familiar with DC and Marvel comics, it's very common. It happens like almost every year or two, where they have some kind of big major summer event. DC is always having some kind of crisis. They're having Crisis on Infinite Earths, or they're having Infinite Crisis, and those are two separate things, or they're having Final Crisis, or they're having DC Metal. But the issue with all of these things is that they are all so big because they're about multiple universes and alternate realities, and they're about alternate continuities. And you see this a lot with Batman comics, where the stakes are constantly having to be raised. It can't be the Joker has one person and the Joker's gonna kill him, because that's already been done. And so as a result, you just have to keep on amping the stakes up. It's like, okay, the Joker killed 5 people last time, now he has to kill 10, now he has to kill 20, now he has to kill 100. But the thing is that none of that matters unless there's an emotional core to the work. Even though I love Batman, and even though I've been reading a bunch of Batman comics recently, I simply couldn't care less about the overwhelming majority of Batman comics because they don't have emotional cores. Most superhero comics that don't work because of that fact. Too often people are focused on style over substance, and I think you can have both. But without substance, your style is meaningless. You can have all the cool battles, you can have all the cool explosions and the gunfights and whatever else in the world, but I don't care about your story unless you give me a reason to care. I don't care about your story unless I care about the characters, unless I have some kind of emotional investment in these people. Because really, I've seen it all before. I've seen alternate realities collapse in on themselves, and I've seen worlds explode, and I've seen the world end, and you see all this crap all the time in superhero stuff. And genuinely, I don't care. I've seen it all before. But the reason I care about this Batman comic, the reason why The Black Mirror is one of my all-time favorite, not just Batman comics, but comics ever, the reason I care about it is because I care about the characters and because it made me feel something. All of the cool action sequences and the cool fight scenes and whatever else, the cool technology that Dick Grayson uses, all of this is awesome, but it really is a cherry on top. Because really the core of why I love this Batman comic is because it resonates with me emotionally. And so I'm not saying that you can't do big stories. I'm not saying that you can't tell stories about the world ending. I'm not saying that you can't have these different universes collapsing in on themselves. What I'm saying is that no matter what, no matter the size or the scale scale of the comic, you have to give readers a reason to care. Because this is not the most bombastic Batman comic in the world. This is not a Batman comic that has any sorts of major ramifications on the continuity long term or anything nerdy like that. I mean, this was one of the last comics that was published before DC rebooted their entire continuity with the New 52. And so what that means is that Dick Grayson went back to being Nightwing after this. He wasn't even Batman after this. Still, in spite of these things, this is still probably my favorite Batman comic. And again, I cannot emphasize this enough. The reason it's my favorite is because it means something. And I do tend to think that the bigger the scale of the story, the harder it is to make your comic mean something, because I think at a certain point our brains just like can't comprehend things. It's like that quote from Stalin where he says something along the lines of one death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic, because really what he means by that, and I can't believe I'm talking about freaking Stalin in a Batman video, by the way, but really all he's saying with that is that at some point our human minds begin to become unable to comprehend the size of certain things. And so it is for that reason that I think that smaller stories tend to work better if you want to connect with your readers on an emotional level, though I don't think that you always have to tell small stories in order to do that. And so this is what I got. If you haven't read the Black Mirror and you like more detective Batman stuff, if you like the Robert Pattinson Batman, then I think you would probably dig this. And especially as someone who for a long time found Bruce Wayne to be a really boring character, which I don't anymore, but if you fall into that camp of not liking Bruce so much, you might like this one since Dick Grayson is the Batman. Honestly, if you just like thrillers or true crime, I would say go for this one. So this is what I got. Thank you for watching, and have a nice night.